The execution of your strategy is what determines your success, not the strategy itself. And we'll go to the charts to look at Ethereum, where I'll explain why I've been getting long ETH. Let me take you to this week's NinjaTrader Charting Edge. Pulled up ETH here on a daily chart, and I want to break this down into really two, I think, different tapes. The first part of the year, the first quarter of the year in ETH is what I want to focus on first. We have my 20 period, 3 standard deviation Bollinger Bands. The yellow moving average is the 100-day simple moving average. The red moving average is the 200-day simple moving average. I also don't have that middle Bollinger Band like I normally do, just those two moving averages. But I also drew a line from the beginning of the year in ETH where we opened the year, and that's just that green line right there. So if you look at the beginning of the year in ETH, really from January to the end of March, I took that fib and I drew it from the top peak to the bottom peak. Now, my fibs are a little bit different than maybe your fibs are. I use a 70% line, I use a 50% line, and a 30% line. Now, that 50% line for me is really my pivot. That really is my gauge of trend. Because once we go down in a market like we did here in ETH, instead of drawing a fib from the high to the low, I draw it from the Bollinger Band peaks, and that price came in right around 32.08 in ETH. And when it stayed below it, really the majority of the first quarter, that was really bearish action. So in this chart, as you can see, ETH is really below everything the first quarter of the year, below my 50%, below the 200-day moving average, below the 100-day moving average, below unchanged for the year. Now let me take you to the second chart. Now, as you'll notice here, at the end of March, we had a little bit of a rally and we had a new set of Bollinger Bands drawn, right? Same indicators I had on the previous chart. Bollinger Bands, green line is unchanged for the year in ETH, red is the 200-day moving average, yellow is the 100-day moving average. Now, I made that 100-day moving average yellow because I noticed it was coinciding with my 50% line. And what I did was I drew that fib from the top peak to the bottom peak, and that level comes in right around 29.82. So just like in the first part of the year where we were staying below that 50% line, now into April, after this rally, we've come back down and tested it, and that 100-day moving average came down and got flat, and that is right at my pivot. So now, unlike the first part of the year where we're staying below it, now we're staying above it. Maybe we see that same type of action, except flipped. Remember, first part of the year below 50%, now the second part of the year is holding it. And I really love the confirmation from that 100-day moving average, which is why I stepped in and started buying ETH right around the 3,000 price. And to me, the risk is relatively cheap here. We recently had a low just below 2,900 in the mid 2,800s. I look at that and say, if it starts to get a close below this 29.82 and a violation of that low, to me, I probably want to start to get out of that position and maybe rethink what I'm looking at, because maybe we start to spend time below it. But for me right now, as long as it stays above it, I'm going to try and stay long. Now, what are going to be my targets? Well, what I also thought was interesting is my 70% line comes in right around 3,400. And that's right around where the 200-day moving average is. So in the short term, what I'm looking at is if we hold this 3,000 area, go up to 3,400, I'll probably trim some of my position, wait to see what it does. But if it pushes above 3,400, you have a couple of roadblocks before I think it could actually see a decent move here. So that's why I would only cover half of my position there and watch to see if it regains it, because this area to me is also a key pivot to the upside. If we get above 3,400 in ETH, get a daily close above it, take this high out, and we were to go positive on the year, I think that would be really, really bullish in ETH. And that top Bollinger Band peak, maybe if you've watched some of my previous videos, you know I like to use that as resistance. And 4,020 to me would be an area where I would think if I'm long still at that point, trim some off. But I look at this and say, if it gets above 4,020, go back to the beginning of the year, that peak of that Bollinger Band comes in right around 4,700. I know we may be getting ahead of ourselves, but I think that is possibly a scenario to test. The reason why I say that is I always say when I look at my Bollinger Bands, the peaks, the tops, and the bottoms, once we start to break out and really develop a new trend after this trend was already in place, That is what I call unfinished business. So I think at some point, based upon the action I've seen so far this year, we could be headed up there. And like I said, flip side is if we do not hold this 2982 and we start to get back below this previous low, back below the 100-day moving average, maybe we head down to the Bollinger Band peaks. But for now, I'm bullish, holding above this area. Those are the levels I'm looking for in ETH. We talked a lot about trading ETH today, but remember, there are micro Ether futures at CME Group. The symbol is MET. They are 1/10 the size of 1 ETH. To learn more, go to cmegroup.com. I want to go over this tweet I put out the other day to tie everything in that I talked about today with that Ethereum trade that I'm looking at. Every strategy works sometimes. No strategy works all the time. Learn the environments when your strategy works well and take advantage of it. Learn the times it doesn't and step back. Learning how to be a great executor of your strategy determines your success, not the strategy itself. I want to talk a little bit about how this plays into what I'm looking at with Ethereum right now to the long side. I have seen multiple times when that 50% line coincides with moving averages or other confirmations. To me, that is a key pivot. Does that mean that it's always going to work? No, nothing works all the time. But when I see it work and I see the response from the market, take the feedback in from the market, I take advantage of it. If I see it chopping around that 50% line, it's above it, it's below it, and I'm getting chopped up because the market is chopping around my area, that's on me. Because every strategy works sometimes, nothing works all the time. So when I see that it is chopping me up or it's not respecting my level, step back. Easier said than done. We're all competitors. We always want to win. But take the response from the market, and when it works, take advantage of it. Right now, I see ETH is working, holding off that level. I'm going to try and take full advantage of it. The minute it stops working and we're chopping around that area, I will step back. Always think about this final thing. Learning how to be a great executor of your strategy is really what determines your success, not the strategy itself. What are your thoughts on ETH right now? Bullish or bearish? Let me know in the comments down below. Never miss an episode of Develop Your Edge. Hit that subscribe button right there. You could also DM me on Twitter at Anthony Crudele. My DMs are open. Don't forget to check out Instagram, Anthony C. Crudele. That's a wrap for today. See you next week.